Now I want you to meet the man that we sent to follow the path of the three boys who discovered the money pit, Commander Iian Murry. Commander, you have a good reason for wanting to do this story, don't you?
Yes, Bill, rather a good one, because you see, I had spent the greater part of my early youth and adolescence in the province of Nova Scotia. So it was a sort of, you might say, returning to my youth to travel the footsteps again of these three boys. And incidentally, Bill, quite seriously, in all my travels all over the world in search of pirate loot, I can honestly say that the story of Oak Island is the most intriguing of any of them. When you just consider the gigantic task involved in burying this thing, this is enough to amaze even the most ardent treasure hunter.
Commander, what about the pirate part of the story? Is there any evidence that would indicate that pirates could bury loot there?
Oh, yes, Bill, very, very definitely, because you see, in the early 1700s, the North Atlantic, and particularly around Nova Scotia, was a hiding ground for pirates. Such characters as Captain Halsey out of Boston, Captain Bellamy, and others. And, of course, it was an ideal, isolated spot.
Where did you begin the journey, Commander?
We began our journey, Bill, actually on the site of this fabulous treasure on Oak Island in Nova Scotia. Coming close to the shore, Bill, and following the actual footsteps of these boys of nearly a century and a half ago, from the very outset, when we put our foot on the beach, the party, consisting of Mr. and Mrs. Hanson and a very competent guide, began to find things which were completely ununderstandable. First, this beach of decomposed granite, brought there by other hands because it was certainly not found on the island. Every step of the way, as we advanced over this island toward the goal for our search, we ran across things that awed us. For instance, this dam, built many, many years ago by some of the unfortunate people who had put money into trying to find this loot, built for the purpose of trying to stem the seawater from washing into their channels.
Commander, I imagine over the years you heard many stories even as a youngster about the money pit.
So many, Bill, that it was really confusing. And that's one reason why we were so glad to have a competent guide with us. Because everything in every way pointed to something which had an air of mystery and of frustration about it. This pier. Somewhere, years ago, thousands of dollars had gone into the construction of this in an endeavor to find the money.
Commander, were there any other evidences of inhabitation on the island?
A rather amusing one, Bill, because at this point, we came across, of all things, an apple tree. This had been planted by the three original boys, and it was still bearing fruit. Mrs. Hanson found one of the apples quite succulent on this hot, sunny afternoon.
Now, we, of course, are trying to get to the money pit itself, being led by the Nova Scotian guide. Do you see evidences of treasure hunters throughout the island?
Everywhere you looked, every foot of the way. Here, for instance, this was the administration of one of the many companies who had sunk thousands of dollars in an endeavor to find the loot.
I understand that President Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, actually invested money at one time in the money pit exploration.
Yes, back in 1909 when he was a student, he and three other gentlemen put $3,000 together and decided they'd have a quest for this treasure. Like all the others, it was a case of frustration. Every inch of the road which the guide followed on our way toward the money pit, Bill, presented something new and something odd. Here was a pit, a dangerous one, in which many years ago the oxen of the three original boys had fallen into, and they had an awful job getting it out. It was well, indeed, that we had this gentleman with us, as I repeated before, because the island is honeycombed with traces and rocks, holes, pieces of equipment of these frustrated companies who over the years have spent nearly over millions of dollars, Bill, in trying to find the solution to this story.